Come on out.
Hello, everybody. Happy Halloween. Welcome back to the
Ooh.
channel. How you doing, Aiden?
I'm good. The scariest thing about Halloween right now is my acne. So I'm just going to address it and get it out of the way. If y'all got to be mean in the comments, whatever, I'm self-aware. But we're here. We're still committing to the bit. Not going to be camera shy. I'm ready for my close-up.
There you
So
go. All right.
talking about a really classic movie. So
A very classic movie. First of all, do you have your Halloween costume picked out? Is it ready?
I did Halloween for like the weekend, like
Okay.
before when I went out. So yeah, I was Rick Grimes, of course.
Yep.
Of course. So yeah, it was a good time.
So I feel like our commenters would want to ask, did you have the hatchet?
I did not have the
okay.
hatchet. I was
Well,
out at bars.
That's
where,
on brand for you in our videos. So
Yeah, right. Always forgetting the hatchet. No, I don't want to bring any weapons or props.
Probably a good idea.
So
we're not reviewing The Walking Dead today. We are talking about Halloween, the original from 1978, the movie that kickstarted
started
Jamie Lee
all
Curtis.
5 branching timelines.
Yeah, and Jamie Lee Curtis's career. So it is, it's a movie that has spawned not only a bunch of timelines within the Halloween franchise, but a whole litany of slasher films that came after it. So Halloween is the original. We can argue whether or not it's the best, but I want to dive in because it is a classic. And
for sure.
And I feel like horror movies are weird because they are a product of their time. And sometimes when you look at a horror movie from 1978, we just watched and reviewed Smile 2. And like Halloween doesn't have the layers that Smile 2 has.
Right.
But it's still great. And when you look at it, like imagine seeing it in a theater in 1978, I think it's a different, thing. But it's hard for us to put ourselves there.
For sure. And there's things about this movie that are dated some ways endearingly, some not, right? Like I think a lot of the slasher tropes that end up getting parodied and satirized later in things like Scream are really present here, right? You've got the teenagers hooking up, you've got the like just people topless when they don't need to be. A lot of that kind of
when
stuff.
I was editing our clips, I'm like, that was a minefield, not gonna lie. I'm like randomly, because I've seen the movie a handful of times now.
Yeah, right.
But I still kind of forget
how much of it there is.
Yeah, so we've got, behind us on the screen here, clips from the film. And I had to make sure that we kept it, as family friendly as you can keep a horror film. So first thing I want to talk about though is the score. Like that song. And it starts right when you get opening credits. And the opening credits are so simple, they're great.
For sure. It's very straightforward, but you get I don't know. I think about graphic design a lot because I do a lot of our thumbnails and stuff like that. And so it's just like, it's one of those things that makes me envious where I'm like, your font choice and your spacing, it's just like, it's so perfect that it sets a tone somehow. You know what I mean? And it's, I think even just like the Halloween font and that little jack-o'-lantern off to the kind of left third of the screen has become like an iconic image in its own right.
And it just keeps very, very ever so slowly zooming in on it, right? As you go.
And it becomes a cool little Easter egg if you start to pay attention and look for it, like that almost exact jack-o'-lantern appears a couple times later in the movie. And it's never really like a focus. Like, look, it's the thing from Halloween. I don't know if any of the later films end up doing that. I haven't seen a ton of them, but.
Yeah. So this movie was a script that was originally titled The Babysitter Murders.
Okay.
And it was funded because the person funding it wanted a movie about babysitters being killed.
Fascinating.
So
what's the beef there?
It was a thing in the late 70s, I think. I don't know. So if anybody in comments is old enough to remember that, let it tell us. But I feel like there was a lot of slasher, like not hysteria, but fears and anxiety in the late 70s.
That makes sense, right? Because you're kind of getting into the early satanic panic and
sure
all that. So,
but That's why the very first murder is what it is. It is a babysitter murder.
Mm-hmm.
And there had to be at least one in the film for it to be funded. So there you go. There's your babysitter murder. Which doesn't, by the way, take place until what, about an hour in? Almost.
Yeah. Yeah, no
It
kidding.
takes us a minute to get there. What did you think of the slow burn? Because it does take a while to get to, if you take out the killing that's in the opening scene.
The very cold, the open, right? Yep. I mean, I think it works just because like they do a really good job of, I think, setting up the characters in the town and just the mystique around it. And you've got the character of Dr. Loomis, who's running all over the place trying to tell people like, you don't understand how serious and how evil and how warped and how demented this guy is. And like, I don't know, it's all very campy.
Donald Pleasance is so over the top.
He's great. He's wild in it for sure. And I think like I actually do kind of like the friend dynamics more than I expect to. Like, this is not really like a scary movie, but I think it does like oddly enough, like the first half of it, I think does the whole like coming of age thing really well. Like, I feel like these are just very believable teenagers and what they're up to is fairly relatable.
Yeah.
Even almost 5 decades out.
Yep,
so
I would agree with that.
And there are some moments that I think that kind of build tension and are, like make Michael's presence known, of him kind of following them from a distance several times. And I think that scariest moment early in the movie is when he's kind of driving by them and they're like, hey, speed kills, asshole. And he slams on the brakes.
Yeah.
And you would think he would like come out and go after them there, but he doesn't. And I think that's a really smart choice. And they kind of, there's that scene where you get the shot coming into from the front camera where they're smoking weed while driving, which you shouldn't do, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And they're listening to Don't Fear the Reaper while Michael is in their rear view.
Yep.
And like hilariously like checking his corners when he turns and stuff like that, looking both ways
Yep.
at intersections.
Even though he's been in an institution since he was like 8 or something, I don't know.
I didn't even think about that.
He said 0 driver's ed.
Yeah.
So
it's just instinctive, man.
It's intuitive. So I mean, good for him. Being safe out there. He's saving all the death for later.
For sure.
Michael does have a heart though, because we have that one scene where it's like the little kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he lets him go when he's out trick-or-treating, walks up to him on the sidewalk. But that original sequence, let's talk that, because we get a very first-person view going through the house. And right away, we're not really sure who we're seeing. And I think it gives you this idea maybe that you're seeing like a killer walk through.
Mm-hmm.
But which we are. But you're thinking more like home intruder.
Right.
But it's really well done, in my opinion, because you start to see the interactions between the characters and the way characters act towards the person behind the camera. And it's not, they're not threatened, right?
Right.
And they act very familiar. I think it's really well done. And it does have the shock value too when you see that, the murder is committed by her younger brother.
Right. Michael, what are you doing? And then,
right?
It comes out of nowhere almost. And that image of just seeing him like on the street, like blank stare afterwards. And it's kind of fascinating because like the parents don't really just seem to know what to do or how to react. They're just kind of looking at him like concerned. I don't think they know exactly what's happened yet, but they see him with the bloody knife. So they know something is seriously wrong. I think it's a really cool image, and it adds a tiny bit of characterization to Michael Myers, which is really like, I mean, they talk about him as the boogeyman, right?
Yep.
In this movie. And I think it's just the idea of just this like faceless, evil specter that's kind of lingering, right? And you don't need to know anything about it other than the fact that like it is dangerous. You need to protect yourself.
Pure evil. Yep.
Right. Which now that I think about it, like I think every horror movie is kind of oddly enough made about the time they're made in. You know what I mean? There's like political subtext there. And I could never figure out what it was with Halloween until I just broke that down that way. And I feel like it's probably just Cold War fear of the unknown, fear of the vague enemy, right?
Yeah,
the vague sense of danger.
Like I said, in the late 70s too, there was a lot of like stalker killer type of things in the news.
Mhm.
And so this idea that this like faceless, nameless stalker,
Yeah.
it played well at the
Right.
time. And Halloween has stayed true to evolving with the times as you've gone,
Mhm.
with some hiccups in the 90s and early aughts. But, outside of that, done a pretty decent job. The opening sequence, and I'm somebody who thinks that sometimes what you don't show and don't tell us in a horror movie makes it scarier.
Agreed.
And I
Agreed.
think if you've seen the 2007 remake-ish reboot, whatever,
I
by
have not.
Rob
That's the
Zombie,
Rob Zombie one, right? Yeah,
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 part of the problem in that movie is he tells way too much about Michael Myers' background,
yeah. Hmm.
like
So
way
I've
too
heard
much.
that it's almost like it's practically like a Michael Myers biopic,
It is.
right?
It's
Like
like the
a
origin story.
exploration, right?
Yeah. So you get the part where he's like hurting animals and just all the, benchmarks of being all the hallmarks of being a, mass murderer later.
Hmm.
But here you just get this blank stare that shows this total disassociation with any sort of empathy or feeling or anything.
Yeah.
And that is scarier than seeing a half hour of his descent in the 2007 movie.
I agree.
And I think it
I
just
can
does
imagine,
a better
right?
job. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of that choice. I think a lot of little choices were made pretty well here.
Hmm.
Uh, One other thing too is like the Haddonfield here is set in Illinois,
Hmm.
but has palm trees. You're not supposed
Yeah,
to
it's
notice that,
very,
but
very visibly California. I always think that
yeah,
when Dr. Loomis pulls over on the side of the road and makes that phone booth call, I'm like, this is obviously
right.
a mid California desert, right?
Yeah. So it was shot in California, but what I would do want to say is I think this is one of the horror franchises where the town is as much of a character as the characters are.
Hmm.
And the other one is probably Friday the 13th with Camp Crystal Lake, right? And all that.
Hmm.
Nightmare on Elm Street, not so much because it's all takes place in dreams
Right.
and
But this is
whatnot.
one of those small towns, right, where nothing ever happens, nothing has ever happened, and nothing ever will happen. So no one takes it seriously really at all. And they have no reason to be paranoid, right? So they're just
Mhm.
not. And I think that's why he's kind of able to run rampant is that you have just such an underprepared police force and a community that's underprepared to defend themselves.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's very much like a place where everybody knows each other. I mean, I didn't realize the first time I watched it, I caught it on this rewatch that like all of the action takes place in a string of what, like 3 or 5 houses that are all in a row
Yeah.
of all their friends
Yep.
kind of live right next to each other and are in the same community, in the same neighborhood, walk to school together. And I think that's what makes it, um, all the more frightening. And especially the fact that like, it's always cool to me when there's a little bit of world building done, or the fact where it's like the characters know a bit about the threat already. They don't perceive it as a threat, but they know about it. I mean, they call it a boogeyman, right? And that's kind of
Yeah.
a perfect thing because there's this urban legend about the killings there, and you see the house, and like, um, her dad's a realtor. Laurie Strode's dad is a realtor trying to sell the house, and she goes up there when she's walking the kid that she babysits to school and puts the key, and he's so scared something's going to happen and nothing does. And I think that's kind of like smart that there's a lot of moments here where you would think like, oh, this moment seems primed for a jump scare, and it doesn't
Mhm.
happen. And I think it builds the tension pretty slowly. But then the other thing is they do a lot of moments of just like kids hanging out and being silly and drinking that I think end up resetting the tension
I
a
agree. And
little
I,
more than I
yeah.
would like.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. I look back to a movie like, same decade as this, The Exorcist, like that has a really slow start too.
Oh yeah.
But when it ramps up, it ramps up. And I feel like kind of the same here.
Mhm.
I think there was just more of a willingness to have more of a slow burn in setting up stories in
Audiences were
some
just
of these.
more patient back then, right? And they had less
Yeah,
competing for their time.
sure.
So
For sure. But I do the point you just made about how, you see a lot of just kids just hanging out. It it's actually, in my opinion, really effective because it does a good job of lulling us back into that comfort and ease. And then all of a sudden, Michael Myers is in the window or something, And
yeah, it's almost easy to forget that this is a horror movie.
Yeah,
in the first half, because there's so many moments where you're just kind of seeing the little relationships and the friendships at play here, and learning, who's hooking up with who, and where Laurie does or doesn't fit into all of it, right? You get that trope of like, which ends up becoming a thing, and to a point where it becomes parodied later, right? Of like, if you have sex in a horror movie, you die.
yeah.
If you are a pure person who, is paying attention and is alert and doing what you're supposed to do,
You do your homework and take all your books home from school and all
except
that.
for a chemistry book.
That chemistry book. Laurie's biggest drama up until Michael Myers showing up is whether or not her friend's going to tell her crush that she likes him, which is a super high school thing, right?
Absolutely.
So it's good, and it's just as true in 2024 as it was in 1978. So,
for sure.
I think a lot of little things, like I said, are really well done here. What was your favorite kill scene of this movie?
So honestly, probably the one where it's after the couple, has their kind of probably too long romance scene, and then the guy comes down, Michael kills him. It's not that kill, but it's when he comes back up because he's just in the sheet with the glasses, and she's like, "Oh my God, you're being so silly, stop it." And it's just such a creepy moment because he's so leery in that moment.
Imagine if she had started to be flirty and intimate with him in the sheet.
Ugh.
Right? Sorry to put that image in your head.
I'm glad we didn't do that. You know what I mean? Because I think they showed restraint, and I think that that's a decision a lot of lesser filmmakers would have made in that time.
There would have been temptation now to do that, I think.
For sure.
For the shock value of it, but then not so much. One of the things I really like, and I think he does it there too, is the Michael Myers little head tilt. That it's really expressive, and even though it's so subtle.
Yeah, and that cues you off immediately. The fact this is not her partner, which I think we already knew at that point.
We already knew because he was attached to the wall at that point.
Oh, that's right. That is such a great kill when he pins him.
And it's funny because it's actually on screen right now on our thing.
Okay.
He's up against the wall, and here's the sheet with the glass. The glasses are a nice touch on the
outside. They are. And I think it builds really fun because it's you get the moment where Laurie discovers everybody's bodies within seconds of each other. A cabinet flings open and someone's in there, and it's just it just keeps happening, and it's absurd, but I think it works for the tone of this movie.
My favorite thing about this movie, before we talk its legacy, is just when I watch it now and I think about how this movie created or solidified a lot of things that just became standard in the horror genre for the 10, 20, 30 years to follow. It's really fun to look at it that way.
Absolutely.
The heroine finding all the bodies within seconds, that has happened in so many horror movies since, right?
For sure.
All of that. So yeah, it's fun to watch it through that lens. So legacy wise, it's 2024 and we're watching this movie and talking about it. That speaks well to it.
For sure. I would think, right?
Yeah.
And I think the best thing about this movie that holds up still is just the atmosphere. We talk about, kind of intangibles a lot when we review newer movies, which is just kind of aura, vibe, rewatchability factor. And even though this movie is not, I think it's slow and the first half isn't super fun to rewatch, I do think there's such an aura, just an energy to this movie. It just has a particular vibe that just fits with the season so well.
Yeah, it really does. It is the scariest film for anybody living in, Los Angeles, Illinois.
Right.
It is.
Santa Modesta, Illinois.
Yeah.
Or Santa Monica, rather. I just dropped that's the name for it in Destroy All Humans. That was a throwback if anybody caught that. Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the legacy is really strong. We just had a trilogy finish up that You know, not all three movies weren't amazing, but I think the overall story the trilogy was telling was really interesting. And we talked about how movies reflect their time, and especially in horror, and those certainly do.
Yeah.
So it's still relevant. It had its hiccups. If you've ever seen Resurrection, have you seen Halloween Resurrection?
I have not.
You should.
I haven't skewed into those. I just know.
You should.
They're pretty rough.
Busta Rhymes takes on Michael Myers in a scene that I would love to call iconic, but I'm not sure that's the word.
Infamous, maybe. Is it Busta Rhymes as Busta Rhymes, or is
no? It's Busta Rhymes as somebody.
Gotcha.
But the words "trick or treat, motherfucker" come out of his mouth. It's as he fights Michael Myers. Yeah. So that, in my opinion, I mean, outside of like the really, really bad Halloween 6 and kind of 5, those are the ones I got like single digit Rotten Tomatoes.
Whoa.
Oh yeah, it's rough. It gets rough there. But Resurrection is just like so obnoxious and over the top that they had to like
kind of a blast.
They shut it down for a while. So yeah, a couple other just really fun facts, just super fast before we get out of here. And there's one, Donald Pleasance, who plays Loomis here, was also a James Bond villain, which is a really weird like thing to think. He was Blofeld in one of the Bond movies. He played the leader of Spectre in one of the Sean Connery films. So cool. Yeah, and then The Mask, which I think is fairly common knowledge, but we'll share it anyway for anybody that doesn't know, is a super cheap prop. It's one of the cheapest things you can think of. They weren't sure what to do and how to make the mask work, and the things they had been playing with weren't scary enough. So they went and got a James T. Kirk mask from a store and painted the face white. So it is a Star Trek William Shatner James Kirk mask painted white. That is
it works. It works, oddly enough, because I think it's
the eyes. It's how dark.
Yeah. And it's just like just the blank facial expression where it's like Uncanny Valley, where it looks like a person, but not really. You know what I mean? It's the shape of a person, but there's none of the actual humanity in there, which I think is so perfect for the fact that like Michael Myers as a character is just like an empty vessel for evil and
often referred to as the Shape, by the way. So I think you know it's a fitting description and a fitting point to end here. Let us know what you think of Halloween. We're not going to score it because it's amazing. I mean, we're talking about the damn thing almost 50 years on. It's good. You know, see it if you haven't. But let us know what you think of the film. Which movie in the franchise is your favorite? Because, hey, if you haven't seen 2 yet, 2 picks up immediately after 1.
I've heard that it's her in the hospital recovering. Yeah. So I might have to check that out like before we get to actual Halloween Day. Maybe on Halloween Day.
On Halloween Day. So it's a good film. It's not as like memorable as 1, but that's hard to pull off. So
for sure.
Anyway, let us know what you think in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel for more horror movie stuff, other movies, and more. Hayden is definitely excited about doing a lot of stuff on Red 1 and probably Wicked coming up soon. So
it's gonna be a rough November, man.
It might. So anyway, have a great Halloween, everyone. And we will talk to you soon.
GG's, take care, y'all. Bye-bye.